Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and obviously it's a weird time, in the world right now. It feels like we're courting controversy everywhere, with whether it's comic books, professional wrestling, movies, even late night talk show hosts right now. And one of the big controversies is with Jimmy Kimmel, and here to talk with me about some of the aspects of this and just our general opinions is Gevian Dargan. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Wes. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. So this is something like we kind of knew about half of the allegations for a very long time. I remember watching The Man Show back in the day. I believe you watched it as well. And it was Jimmy Kimmel and Adam Carolla, and they would do a lot of crazy stuff that you would never put on TV today. And one of them was the skit where Jimmy Kimmel was essentially making fun of Karl Malone, kind of making him sound like a kind of a brain dead idiot. And it was certainly not a flattering parody. He was certainly making fun of him. And we'd known this for a long time, but Jimmy Kimmel, for some reason, he kind of became like maybe the face of a movement or a demographic as far as condemning people and their actions. And I always thought it was kind of funny. I was like, does he not remember the Man Show? Do his handlers not remember the Man Show? Do the people that are kind of pushing him into this role not remember all these things that he did? And he always seemed like an odd choice for the role.
Yeah, and I think it's that when you have certain celebrities who get rehabilitated, if you will. So my example of that is always Wendy Williams. For those who are familiar with the Wendy Williams show, if you grew up in New York, or I think her show was at least syndicated nationally on some level. Wendy was not only like one of the gossip queens, but she was a vicious gossip queen. She would drop dimes on people that it was just like, dang, son, it's like, really, you're gonna go there on somebody's personal and private life. Probably the most infamous example of that was, and I don't remember all the details, but it was this thing with Puff Daddy, where I guess if I remember it correctly, and people in the comments can correct me if I'm wrong, where she basically insinuated that he was gay, and Puff Daddy took great offense about the fact that his son heard that, and there was a big controversy at the time. And but she was known to do that. So when she came along to get a talk show gig, and I remember I believe I was here in Chicago, and started seeing magazines with her on the cover. Oh, what's going on here? I was like, oh, something must be going on. She must be moving into a new gig or a new phase of her life, because this was too much of like an apology tour. To basically, to get that rehabilitated image, because you hope everybody doesn't remember all the basically questionable stuff you did back in the day. And so that you're stepping into this new like Oprah, Mama Bear kind of role, or in this case with Kimmel, Papa Bear kind of role. Now you just hope people don't remember all that stuff way back when, and they'll just move on to the next thing. It's no different than Trump going to their printers. Once you get that stamp of mainstream approval, people just kind of forget all the kind of crazy and wacky stuff and wacky things you did, or maybe even borderline unethical or inappropriate things you did back in the day. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree with you. Kimmel was like, that was an odd choice, but I hope it was worth it. Because Malcolm X said the chickens are coming home to roost now. So
yeah, so it was kind of weird the way he handled it, because these the Karl Malone thing kept coming back up, and you're like, well, it seems like something he's going to have to address. Obviously, the Jimmy Fallon had a very similar situation where he actually went out and he's like, yes, I did this impression of Chris Rock. I regret it, and I wish I could undo it, as part of his Saturday Night Live thing. And Jimmy Kimmel decided to take a summer vacation rather than address it. He didn't want to apologize about it. It seemed like a really odd response. I was like, I do not get what's going on here. But I think we're starting to get a better picture now, because it's also come to light. And this was something I was unaware of, even though back when I was younger, I did buy like parody music CDs, specifically Adam Sandler, because I thought they were pretty funny. I never bought anything with Jimmy Kimmel, but apparently he did some like a Christmas album where he took like an old school Snoop Dogg song, changed up the lyrics, and he was pretty vulgar and a lot of use of the N-word. And so I think maybe he knew that this was coming on top of it. I think that's maybe why he was trying to disappear.
Yeah, I mean, I've never heard of that. Never heard the album. I'm not going to go look for it. But it's like, dude, again, I hope it was worth it. It's like if you wanted to parody Snoop, then just understand the little thing about Snoop as it is. Now, look, when Snoop came on the scene, it was big, it was all that. But even back then, not every black person who listened to rap music or every black person in the community appreciated the use of the N-word, much less misogyny, in rap music. It has a long history, especially when it became more and more prevalent. Now I'm going to put not all of it, but some of it on gangster rap. But like as that became more and more of the norm and more dominant in the Messiah, there's always a thing about, quote unquote video hoes and stuff like that in the videos. And yeah, when I was a teenager and a young man, that's exactly why you watch the video to see the young ladies in the bikinis and all that kind of stuff, and just basically these over sexualized human beings. But the thing is that if you don't know enough to realize that it's already frowned upon in the community as it is, and then you want to parry it via the white guy and don't understand all the cultural implications of that, then I can't help you with that one. Now, I understand that was maybe he thought it was 96 and he thought it was a new day and this and that. Okay, you can believe that if you want, but he's about to find out in 2020. It's a different era, a different age. It's like, dude, sometimes you got to think, you got to kind of think 5 minutes in front of your face. You got to think, okay, if I'm going to do this, and if it's in the realm of comedy, is this something that's gonna last the ages, or is it something I'm going to regret? I think, when you get into the whole thing of comedy and humor, where the whole point is that you're supposed to, in some sense, punch up. Like any comedian will tell you that you never punch down, you punch up. The thing with the Karl Malone is that in Kimmel's mind, is he looking at, well, am I punching down at Karl Malone because he's a black man, or am I punching up at Karl Malone because he's a celebrity? He just has like a funny way of talking. Ari Spears, who's on Mad TV, did a similar impression of Shaquille O'Neal, where it was just like, yeah, if it was anybody else but Ari Spears doing it, he'd be like, oh man, that's kind of messed up. But in terms of him using the whole N-word and all that, it's like, dude, in '96, if you can't figure out even in parody, that might not be a good idea. I can't help you with that one, but I hope it was worth it. I really hope it was worth it.
So I remember when I was seeing the Jimmy Kimmel stuff come up, I was like, well, obviously he was the performer. I was like, what kind of responsibility does maybe the producer of this or whoever wrote the skit, are they equally responsible for all this? But that kind of goes out the door on this one, because if you look at the CD material, it says Jimmy Kimmel wrote the lyrics, he wrote all the skits that are in there. So not only was he the performer, he was essentially the producer and the man that wrote all the jokes. So I'm surprised, it feels like with something like this, like he probably knew that you got to get out in front of stuff like this.
Yeah, no. The thing is, it's just like with the guy, and please refresh my memory. Was it Hartley Sawyer, the guy with the elongated man? Yeah, it's like, dude, it's apologize. Just apologize. Just say, look, it was a different time. If I had known what I know now, yeah, it's all going to be saccharine and routine, and people are going to be like, yeah, whatever. But the thing is that just apologize. Apologize. Acknowledge that what you did was ill-advised, ill-conceived. Unless you think it wasn't, then just have your explanation ready. So I'm gonna go to another person that kind of ran into that same thing, and now he just doesn't care, and good for him, which is Dave Chappelle. When Dave Chappelle had Chappelle's show on, oh, believe me, when it first came on, there were people in my circles who were like, man, what is he doing? The stereotypes, the this and that he's putting forward, and so on and so forth. And I just tell people all the time, I just hope he's got a good excuse for it. I hope he has his explanation ready for for the particular approach he's taking to comedy. So when he went on Charlie Rose, he said that, it's about culture. Everybody has a different culture. This is just the way that people talk about culture, and this is what was reflected in that. But then apparently he was doing one taping, and there was a white guy that was sitting in the front row of the audience who just laughed a little bit too hard at one of his jokes. And then he realized kind of like, what am I doing? And took off to South Africa. So it's kind of like, if you ever seen the movie Hollywood Shuffle with Robert Townsend, that movie way back in the late 80s, I believe it was, addressed all of this kind of stuff, which is basically, are you willing, in order to make a buck or to do whatever it is, willing to sell your soul and or dignity? And some people are and some people aren't, or they do it. They just think, well, all I got to do is do this to get to the next level. I don't know what their motivations are. But at a certain point, especially in this day and age, you have to realize is if it's on video or if it's on audio, there's a good chance if you get yourself in a certain position, it's going to come out. Because apparently, it seems like the reason why this came up in the first place is because, and I don't know if this is true or not, he was trying to get Tom Arnold to turn over a tape with Donald Trump that had Donald Trump saying the N-word on it. So in retaliation, now it's like, well, if you're going to go back to stuff like that, we'll just go back through your readily available past publicly and talk about all the questionable stuff you did. Yeah, you know, Jimmy should have just slowed his roll. That's
that old saying, you know, those with, you know,
Yep.
the he without sin cast the first stone. If people, men who live in glass houses shouldn't throw rocks, kind of thing. Like
there you go. Yeah,
or always, the golden rule: do unto others as you would like them to do unto you, kind of thing.
Yeah, it always comes back. There was I don't know if you watched a series called McMillions. McMillions, which was on HBO, and that's what I like. I thought one of the most profound things that were shared in the series is the Mark Devereaux, who I believe was the lead prosecutor in the case of the Department of Justice. And what he said is that there's not one person in this world who can look in the mirror and not think of one thing that they have done in their life that they don't regret. And if you're not operating from that as a human being, professionally, personally, whatever it is, then you're not getting it, which means if you're going to go hard at somebody for something that they did, and it might be rightfully so, there's nothing wrong with holding people accountable. Holding people accountable is not a problem. But you better do a checkup from the neck up first and hold yourself accountable to the things that you're talking about and say, hey, would you rather have grace or justice? Because justice means you pay. Grace means let's take some things into account and talk about this and see how we can get to a place where we don't have to disband you from the community of man. But it's like, am I saying that Kimmel was being a hypocrite? Probably. Probably. It's like, he's like, well, I was just joking. It was just a job. I didn't mean it. Yeah, well, that's not how the people who are listening to it now or hearing it now are taking it. So it's like, would you, now that you find yourself in basically the shoes you allegedly he was trying to put Donald Trump in, do you think everybody should understand now, or do you think everybody should get the result that Kimmel, we could say, if it's true, had intended for Donald Trump to suffer? So, like you said, if you live in that glass house, boy, you better at least know what you're doing in your own home, because everybody else does. So
yeah, it's crazy. I could just I think if everybody witnessed their neighbor on their very worst day, we would all have very low opinions of each other. I think we're all men, we're all flawed, we all make mistakes, and I take no I take no joy in what's happening to Jimmy Kimmel. Obviously we're covering the news here, and it kind of bleeds in with a lot with having culture right now. But this is absolutely the worst time for this to come out. It feels like everything is supercharged right now, and his summer vacation might become permanent. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because everybody's looking to get receipts now, and everybody's looking to get payment, and part of it I think is that we have had a very long tradition in our society, in our history, where people get away with stuff. People. It's like, and I don't blame people. It's like people get mad at cancel culture, but the thing is, you got to kind of answer your question: how does cancel culture happen? Okay, so now say there's this whole thing with Megan Fox and Michael Bay. So let's just say there was a time, I remember when the two of them were butting heads all the time. It was like she was saying stuff about him and he was saying stuff about her. And it's like, instead of them playing that out in the public sphere, if they had just gone to each other and aired their differences, who knows what might have happened? You might have gotten to the same result without all the public acrimony. But, if she had gone to him and says, look, I don't like the way you're doing this, and I don't like the way you're doing that, and I feel this way and that way, and if he didn't hear her, then it's like, well, she's got to go get somebody else and say, look, can you come over here and just kind of help us kind of work out the situation here? And if that didn't happen, then basically you go public. And I have no problem with that, because at some point, somebody should take some responsibility for basically smoothing out or resolving the situation where basically, if possible, people can maintain their dignity. Because now when you talk about stuff that's illegal, bro, you report it, you let the authorities work it out, and people can always drop charges or ask for a lighter sentence or whatever the case may be. But we're not talking about, a lot of stuff we're not talking about here is not like illegal crimes. It's just whether it's appropriate or not. Is it wise or not? Is it ethical or not? Is it, are you really thinking about, in some cases, the human emotion and damage you're doing, the emotional and in some cases spiritual damage you're doing to people, which they are not technically crimes, but you can at least say it unethical. They at least violate the doing to others as you would have them doing to you. So, Jimmy Kimmel using the N-word, it's like, just because a bunch of rappers do that they're black and they do that, and it seems like the quote unquote community lets them get away with it. I still then would argue that, yeah, bro, look at who 90% of that audience is right now. And that 90% of that audience for a long time now has not been black. So, especially by 96, I think that was the case already at that point. So basically, dude, you were already in dangerous territory when you started that. It's just like you're just walking into a minefield. But I think we have to be able to get to a point now where the reason why something like a cancel culture exists is because the people who are in authority do not handle these situations well. They turn a blind eye to it. They act like it didn't exist. No one did due diligence on Jimmy Kimmel, really. None, like you said, none of his handlers said, okay, look, Jim, you realize this might look a little hypocritical that, you're sitting up here taking this very high moral stance about a Donald Trump because it's easy to do. When basically, if some people flip the script on you, they can make some of the same charges against you. And they are doing that now. It's like you got to have a little bit of a sense of yourself when you're saying, like, for me, there's certain things, like if I was talking about certain things, I tell people straight up, it's like, look, if you went back on YouTube, Yahoo, whatever it is, there's probably some things that you would hear me saying or stances I would be taking that I completely reversed on that now. To use President Obama's words, I've evolved on that because that's what human beings do. So the thing is that I think what really most people are looking for, do you have a sense of, man, can you acknowledge, yeah, that was a messed up view to have? And have an honest conversation about that, as opposed to standing on a soapbox and acting like you have nothing in common or could never be what that person was. Good luck with that self-righteousness. I don't have any use for it, but that's apparently what Kimmel right now, until he apologizes, that's the tactic he's going to take. So again, I hope
I believe within the last bit of time he has formally apologized finally, but it's taken even more allegations to come out here. But I'm with you. The self-righteous is never a good look. Almost no one can wear it well. It always eventually someone will see through the emperor's clothes. And I hope that we can get through all these hard times and we can finally talk to each other, treat each other with a little bit of respect, maybe have some grace, a little bit of forgiveness, and maybe move on past all this. But I don't see that happening.
Because the key thing is right now is, unfortunately, it's kind of like how can I say this? So I kind of want to use what Ric Flair, who was a wrestler, said one time. It's kind of like when he's talking, Space Mountain, when he he was talking about like basically dealing with his kids in his autobiography, and basically he's saying is that because his kids have seen him in so many situations, they have seen him really at his worst. There's certain things he just can't talk to his kids about. It's just he can't. I think he was saying one time he was trying to tell his son how to deal with his grandson in a certain situation, and his son either shot him a look or said something to him that basically gave the effect that, really, you're going to tell me how to raise a kid? You're not going to tell me how to raise a kid. There was a documentary called Hoop Dreams, where it was pretty much the same dynamic. There was a scene where the kid apparently saw his dad when he was trying to buy, illegal drugs from someone, when he had pretty much abandoned the family. And even though the father and the mother had reconciled, when there was a moment when the kid was considering, I think it was which college he was going to go to, and the dad tried to give him advice, he got brutally rebuffed by the son. Because it's like, dude, there's some trains that when they leave the station, you can run as hard as you can to try to catch them. That moment, that time is over. They figured out how to do it. And I think that's what we're living through right now, is that you have had a period of time where people have been unheard. See, when people are going through great times of stress, and when people are being persecuted, if you will, and there is real persecution, whether people want to admit it or not, the most important thing is that people want to be heard. Doesn't necessarily mean that they get results of justice, but that their case was heard. And even if the person who's adjudicating it is a complete dirtbag, at least you got to take your shot. Some of these people who have never been heard, never been taken seriously, have carried around for years, and other people are recognizing that's not a good thing. So now you just have like this kind of like, and I'm not saying this to diminish it, but almost this vomiting moment of, we always go from one end of the spectrum to the other. It's like on one end, we turn a blind eye to everything, and on the other end, we attack everybody as if something's going on. Now, I want to go back to the recent Me Too situation, because that's what it was. That situation called for balance and nuance, because there are two lives involved, and if anybody was just off by a little bit, you end up destroying a person in a way that they cannot recover from. Reputational damage, and I say this to everybody who's listening, Because you understand this. Reputational damage is something that no one can restore. I don't care who you are, how guilty or innocent you are, or when somebody makes an accusation about you, and depending on how public it goes, there's always going to be a remnant, a group of people always going to say, yeah, where there's smoke, there's fire. Something must have happened. You can't do that. So when allegations are made, they not only do they have to be taken seriously and investigated, but the person who's making them better be very serious and very clear about the accusations they're making. Because while it may get adjudicated in a way that if the person wasn't telling the truth or was mistaken, that somebody might not suffer a criminal penalty, in terms of their social life, that stigma, that damage, it's done. It's done. You never get that back. Never.
Yeah.
You never get it back.
Yeah, whenever you go for a job nowadays, one of the first things they do is a Google search on your name.
That's right. And they look it up. And you can sit up there and give 15 explanations and show them a piece of paper saying this was a deposition, sir. I didn't do it. But because now you have the hint of that stink on you, it's like, and because you have a customer base that apparently is like, well, he did something 20 years ago, and even though it's clear that he's reformed in many ways, because I'm standing on a particular soapbox that day, this guy's done. So I don't know how many of your viewers were familiar with a guy named Jink Uger with the Young Turks. And that's precisely what happened with him. He was one of the co-founders of this organization called Justice Democrats. So, and this had been known for, I knew it for years, that he was a rabid conservative back in the day, had written a bunch of blog posts that even he admits he's embarrassed that he wrote back at that time. But these guys went all the way back into the Wayback Machine to get those and basically used that to oust him. Part of me figures that it was just convenient. They wanted to take the organization over anyway, and they used that to do it. But it's like, dude, it's like, whatever you think of the Young Turks, if you think that his time at the Young Turks was still somehow not enough to at least show that he's kind of evolved from a rabid conservative to at least a somewhat mindful progressive, then there's no hope for any of us at this point. There's just no hope. It's like, you just hope things don't. At this point, you just hope things don't come out, or you just apologize fast, explain even faster, and just hope people move on to the next thing, or something else will come up. So that's kind of like, I think what happened with R. Kelly at one point when he was back in the soup again, and then I think that whole Jesse Smollett thing came up. And I know Robert Kelly was like, "Oh man, thank you." Because the heat off me right now, because it's like that's about the only thing that can save you is that some other greater scandal comes up and people just forget about. Oh, what was that? Just that Latour thing? Yeah, because the Ellis thing is sucking up all the oxygen in the room. It's not a good thing, man. It's not a good thing. Yeah, everybody might start taking some vacations.
So, Jermaine, I just want to say thank you very much for joining me.
Not a problem.
It's hard stuff to talk about, but I think it's important to have these open conversations and let people have an opinion and hear what we kind of think about it. Is there anything else that you need to say before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I would just say this. I agree with you, Wes. These are hard things to talk about, but I think we have allowed our public discourse to become very coarse, and it's to the point that we're yelling at each other, getting each other canceled, not hearing each other. And I just think that there are a lot of grievances that have to be worked out. There are a lot of issues that have to get a different look and a different perspective, different conversation they've had in times past. But we all got to we either have to know or remember what's the goal. The goal is to reconcile. The goal is to reconcile, not to throw away, but to reconcile. And when that's the goal, it doesn't mean that people don't get held accountable. And I think that's a lot of times when this breaks down. The minute you start protecting people just because they're your friend or because you realize if they get found out, you get found out, then you're always going to have this kind of environment. And with social media now, it's like there are no gatekeepers. So it's like be kind to each other because one day you may need that kindness in return. That's all. Be kind and be thoughtful. Think 5 minutes in front of your face. That's what I would say.
Well, thank you. It's very well said.
Yeah. All right. Take care, Wes. Appreciate it. Always a pleasure to be here.